Hello and welcome. Today I have Rudolf back. Rudolf, how are you going?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. And what are we talking about today, Rudolf? We're going to be discussing Tataria.
Well, the the end of the last interview, we kind of touched on the shape of the Earth, and I
Right.
kind of wanted to go into that because it's like when I got into studying that maybe 2 years or maybe close to 3 years ago, and I spent quite a lot of time listening to people being interviewed about it, and
Mm.
it's very much a conspiracy kind of area where you know
Oh, yeah.
you're a nutter if you even think it's possible.
If you even question it, yeah.
Yeah. And my the way that I got into this was I had a binge on watching documentaries about the pyramids and Egypt and
Right.
that ancient history for a start, and
Yeah.
like where did all that come from? How did they manage all those things? How did they build them?
Mm.
Because we couldn't do that today. It's impossible.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, they're
then,
very how much does each block weigh? It's like
oh, it's ridiculous. Like,
100 tons or something, or 60 tons or something like that.
but
So,
there's all sorts of theories of like the one, like just how did they get them up there? Not just the size of them, but how did they actually stack them up? And so the theory of having a really long ramp
a
to
ramp.
get things
It would have
to the
taken
top.
age. How'd they build that?
Yeah, the thing is that the ramp would have been more volume than the pyramid itself in material to build. And then you have to take it all down again.
Yeah.
And then
And the ramp would have to be very strong, obviously, to
Graham Hancock,
yeah.
I think that's his name.
Yeah, I know Graham.
Um,
I know of him.
they're saying that the Sphinx and the erosion on the Sphinx and that, because it's sort of the head of the Sphinx basically was a rock originally, and the body of it is carved out of the plateau. So
Okay.
there's this sunken plaza basically around the Sphinx,
Right.
and the proportions of the body and the head don't match at all. Like the
Okay.
head's way too small. And
Right.
so at some point in history, the head has been remodeled,
Okay.
something else. And also the erosion is inconsistent with wind, because if you
Correct. Yeah.
have sandstone that is eroded by wind erosion, it will wear the soft parts out from between the harder parts, right? And you get this kind of jagged horizontal erosion.
Okay.
Whereas if you have water erosion, it's a vertical pattern, which you
Right. Okay.
find on that plateau and on the Sphinx. So
Mm.
that indicates that there was a lot of rain over a very long period in that area. And
Hmm.
like it's basically a desert now, but and that's basically how they figured out how much older than what the narrative is that those monuments actually are.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the precession of the equinox and the actual constellation that in the zodiac that the Sphinx was pointing at the time it was built.
Mm.
Anyway, and so from that, the connection to the stars and the universe, the next binge was to go through all the planets, all the star systems, all the documentaries, mainstream documentaries still at the time,
Right.
about space travel and all the planets and what they're made of and blah, how long it would take to get there and the probes that they supposedly sent out.
Yeah.
And then I came across something to do with flat Earth, and I said, like, I remember putting that comment under that video saying, well, the stars are round, planets are round, like the cells in our bodies are round. Basically, everything is round. So why would the Earth be flat? Kind of thing. It makes no sense. Like it'd be the odd one out in that whole string of roundness. And then I found this podcast called Globebusters, which basically it's sort of a core, and also Jeranism as well. And they basically are just discussing amongst themselves research that they've done. They had guests on, like there was someone, for instance, they had a vacuum expert that was talking about the ISS and how basically that was completely impossible to have O-rings in a complete vacuum, and the actual strength of what a vacuum is. And I don't know if you remember a little while back, they had a meteorite strike in a hole in the ISS, and they said the astronaut put his finger in the hole to stop the air leaking out.
Yeah.
Seriously, that was on mainstream news, and they
in the actual ISS, like he just went like that.
And ISS had a hole, and they put his finger into the hole to stop the air leaking out. It's completely crazy. And then the official photo of that hole was the same as what had been on an album cover of some band. Exactly the same image.
That's funny.
So and it's like
they do that a lot. They do that with
but you know the woman they've got now with the ventilator in the hospital.
Yeah.
That supposedly got COVID. It's the same image as you find on the cigarette packets.
Oh, is it really? Oh, the Australian ad that just came out? The one that just came out?
Yeah, it's the same what you find on the cigarette packets. So they just recycle stuff.
Oh, wow. Okay, I
don't realise it. They did the same thing with the hospital.
Yeah, they did that 3 or 4 times or something.
Yeah, like it was the same image or footage was used originally in Italy. Then it was a hospital in New York. Then the same image was a hospital in Melbourne. And then they used it somewhere else. And it's like, do you think we're all just completely stupid?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. You know, I think though, I think maybe they probably did that. They've been doing it for a long time, but now that more people are awake, I think they probably overdid it. That's, if the white hats are in control, maybe they made them do it on purpose, because then it just becomes blatantly obvious, right? And it just becomes very stupid. And
people still don't put 2 and 2 together.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's quite funny. And the funny thing was is that they excused themselves after doing it the first time. They said, "Oh, we made a mistake," and then they went and did it again.
Anyway, back to the story. So I went through. And the more and more I listened to these, and these would be 2 or 3 or 4 hour long podcasts of really, really intense and interesting, fascinating evidence that the globe model is complete bogus. It doesn't work in physics.
Sure.
But the first thing is that water always finds its own level.
Yeah.
Right? And so how does the water curve around this ball? At what point, if this is level here, at some point
it should just fall away. Yeah.
And they went into gravity, and like one particular one that I remember is when they did the surveying of the land, of how that works. So like you set one point, so this is sea level on this coast, and then you triangulate these points, and you triangulate points all across up and down the landscape to get the profile, and then at the other end you're back on sea level, which is the same level as what you had over here. So where's that curve in between? It's just you've got the horizontal line.
You mean like from coast to coast? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, if you were surveying from one coast to another, like the 2 bodies of water would be.
Yeah, but it should be like, it shouldn't be. They're both level, but they shouldn't be level because it's a curve. So it should be like one's over here, the other level's up here somewhere.
Yeah, but like, and another thing was in 2016, they opened the St. Gotthard base tunnel in Switzerland. So it's 57 kilometers under the Alps.
Right.
And over that kind of distance, you'd have a substantial curve, but there was nothing in the calculations or even on their drawings that would indicate that there's a curvature there for this tunnel.
Right.
And it does have a hump in it, but that's for drainage so that you don't get water collecting in the middle of it, so it drains to either end.
Sure.
But they have a horizontal baseline, and it says, well, it has this gradient up to this point and that gradient going back down, and they don't actually come out the same altitude above the sea. So, but the baseline is straight.
Yeah.
For 57 kilometers, there should be a curve in that if that was a real thing.
And there's really long bridges. Like there's some really long bridges, you know, in the world somewhere where they just, it's just flat the entire time.
Another thing that they looked at was about radio technology. And just mentioned the Titanic. Its radio, and this was in 1912, its radio had a reach under the right conditions, which was basically on clear, cold nights, of a couple of thousand miles, which would be way over the curve if there was such a curve, wouldn't it?
Yeah, of course.
So how could it be reaching that far? And then, like as a counter argument, some people would put up, well, if the Earth is flat, then why can't I see Melbourne from here? So if I stood on the edge of the Bass Strait, why can't I see Melbourne on the other side?
It's a bit far away.
Of perspective.
Yeah.
Or even with a telescope, you couldn't actually see it. But first of all, we've got an angular.
Not if it was really strong. Not if it was really strong.
But there's other factors that come into it. But first of all, we've got perspective. Right? Anyone who's ever been to an art class will understand about the vanishing point and angular resolution that we can see with our eye. So an object, the further away it gets, the smaller the resolution becomes, and eventually it disappears into the horizon. So the horizon is really the vanishing point of our ability to see things.
Yeah.
Because like parallel tracks on a railroad, they never actually meet, but they appear to in the distance.
Yeah,
right?
they look like they go.
Yeah, but that's because of perspective.
Yes.
And so people have, and another reason why you can't see that far in the distance, even if you had help with technology, is that there's too much moisture, dust in the air.
Yeah, the atmosphere has to be right.
Like there's basically, if you stack sheets of glass, 100 sheets of glass, you wouldn't be able to see through 100 sheets of glass. It's just, it becomes opaque at some point.
Right. Yeah.
But the same thing happens with the atmosphere.
Sure.
Which also, and another thing was there's footage of the midnight sun in the north, where the camera tracks the sun for a whole day, and the camera is stationary and it just spins around.
Okay.
All right.
The actual camera just turns.
Yeah. So the camera is fixed to the ground and it's aimed at the sun as it goes around 360.
Okay.
And when they started looking for similar footage in Antarctica, which you should be able to make exactly the same, they could not find any uncut footage from Antarctica.
Right.
Didn't exist. And when they started investigating, it's like, why are there black spots? Why are there cuts in this supposed 24-hour footage in Antarctica? The answer was something like, oh, well, we just edited out the the black bits in it. So
What black
and
parts?
then they actually released fake footage of, and people have taken that footage apart and said it's not real. Like that's not one continuous shot.
Yes.
So, and if you think about it,
Because there should be no black spots if it's
no, if and another thing that I've learned about through that is this coffee cup caustic, it's called. So let's imagine this lens here. Let's say that the flat earth is my hand, and if this is the dome or the atmosphere. And when you shine a light from the outside into this, it will appear on my hand as if it was a spot. So that would be the sun or the moon.
no.
But if you shine it in at a particular angle, the whole edge of this lens will light up.
Okay.
So that could explain 24-hour daylight in Antarctica.
Right.
When the sun is at that particular angle, it lights up the whole outside of it. And I did ask somebody that I know who's been to Antarctica several times, and she wouldn't actually answer any questions about Antarctica. I think that she was under an NDS.
You reckon they get them to sign something if they go visit it?
Like, there's no other way that you would get to Antarctica.
Oh, you have to sign an NDA to go there.
And I asked her, in Antarctica, do you have 24-hour sun or 24-hour daylight? She goes, I think it's daylight.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference whether there's daylight or actual sun in the sky for 24 hours.
Right. Yeah.
Difference between one and the other. But anyway, so these are all these kind of hypothetical, you can't really go there to see it for yourself. You've got to rely on information that you're given. But there is this calculation, the curvature calculation. And that's, we're given, puppy dog, are you hungry? You have to wait. So they're giving us the diameter of this supposed diameter of this globe, which then gives you a particular curvature. And there's a formula for each, it's 8 inches per mile square. And for the second mile,
can you say that? You say that again because it cut out and you got frozen. Go from the first
8 inches
mile.
It's 8 inches per mile squared, right?
Okay, yeah.
So it's an exponential curve. It's not a gradient. So for every mile it drops 8 inches, and then the second mile is 16.
Right.
So, and then the next mile it's 3.
Yeah, I understand.
8 times 3 times 3, and then 8 times 4 times 4, and then 8 times 5 times 5. And so you get this kind of a shape, right? In theory. So
yes,
with that calculation, and you know your observer height and the distance of the object that you can see, you know how far that is, you can calculate how far behind that curve it should be.
Yeah.
Basically, the thing with the globe Earth, the problem with it is that we can see too far.
Yes.
Like people have measured coastlines across bodies of water, and people have filmed, and with infrared technology, they've been able to cut through this atmospheric haze and cloud and what have you, and film mountain ranges that are just like miles and miles and miles away that don't show up on with your eyes or a normal camera, but you put an infrared camera on, you can see these mountains. So quite amazing. Anyway, so I ended up in July, I went down the coast, and I ended up at a beach, and it was a clear winter day, and I just took photos because I had this, that was in the middle of when I was doing this, and there was a cargo ship out on the water a fair way away. I had no way of checking how far it was at the time, but yes. So picking up, you're going to have to edit that bit out.
Yeah.
So I was on that beach, and it was near Devonport, and I was just taking photos generally of the view. And when I got home, I looked at my photos and I realized that I could see all the headlands going along the coast, like all the promontories. And so what I did, I went to Google Street View to all these headlands to identify first of all, identify them all on the map, and then go to that first headland and street view across the water at the shape of the next one, and basically identify what I was looking at on my photos. And the furthest one away I could see from Devonport was Badger Head, I think it's called, at Greens Beach. It's about 60, 70 kilometres away.
Okay.
And according to and also then went to an official altitude map to see how high is that land at Badger Head. And it was something like, let's say 10 meters. I can't remember exactly what it was. It's a couple of years ago now. But anyway, according to the curvature calculator, that should have been below the horizon. But you can see the whole from the water up to the top at that distance. And another thing was that detached from the mainland, way in the distance, was what looked like an island.
Right.
And the nearest island away from near the coast that it could have been in that line of sight was 9th or 10th Island, which was over 100 kilometres away from where I was, which would have been completely hidden. So that sealed the deal for me, and basically I moved on from there. I mean, okay, well, it can't be curved, therefore it can't be a ball, and I'm leaning towards it being flat, because evidently it is. But, you know, when people are confronted with the idea of flat Earth, they think of a disc floating in space.
Correct.
And then they go, well, why are you not off the edge?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But the whole concept of this planet spinning around in a vacuum doesn't translate to the flat Earth, because flat Earth isn't floating in
it's a different model. Yeah.
So like the first thing I went through that people thought, well, that beyond Antarctica is, you know, maybe it's just a vast frozen wasteland, and it has these melted, like you've got a solar system that melts a hole into the ice, and that's where our Earth sits.
Right.
And that there could be other holes in the ice somewhere else.
Sure.
There could be, you know, maybe the next hole is where the dinosaurs are. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, you know, I didn't really go much further than that. I'm just thinking, well, it's not a globe. What they're telling us is all lies. And the reason for the globe model, which only came like the first actual globe is from around the time of Columbus, so 1400 something.
Yeah.
And apparently it was even the early 1900s still in school curriculums that the Earth was in fact flat. So this whole globe indoctrination has only sort of come around since
100 years ago.
Maybe the 1930s.
Yeah, not even actually, because did you see that video of some guy looking at Encyclopedia Britannica from like 1958 or 57? And he opened it up and he read about Antarctica, and he actually says in there's a dome and it tells you the height and everything.
Well, a lot of these nuclear tests that they've done, like they
Yeah,
were
Operation
called
Fishbowl.
Operation Fishbowl, which basically, is a dome upside down. Um, and also
Correct.
the um, what's it called? Project Dominic or something like that. So dome. Dominic also means
Mm,
God.
okay.
So basically, they're trying to find a way to break the dome
Yeah.
or break through the dome. And
Have you seen the
in the
videos?
Bible, it says that in Genesis, it separated the firmament, separated the waters above from the waters below. So is above that dome actually water?
Yeah. Yeah.
There have been amateur rockets that got sent up that appear to hit something
Yeah.
that is like water, and also
Or something hard anyway.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but not hard enough for it to like crush, because if
Oh
you
no.
hit something, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting,
So
isn't it? But did you see the footage of Operation Fishbowl? Have you seen that?
of the nuclear tests,
Yeah.
hits some kind of a surface.
Yeah, exactly. It's looked like fireworks, kind of like it goes up and it's like it
Yeah,
goes all over the place. It doesn't just like it looks like it definitely hit something. Yeah.
yeah. It's all kind of a mystery, and you can deduct your own conclusions out of it. And where I'm at is that basically the globe
What about a
model
rainbow?
has
Because a rainbow is is like that. You know,
been,
rainbow is round.
and apparently you cannot produce a rainbow indoors.
I've seen a video of a guy doing it, but I don't think it was round. I think it might have just been a straight line. You know?
But like, yeah, I reckon the rainbow does have something to do with the firmament.
Probably. Yeah.
Okay, so the globe model that they've indoctrinated us with, basically, to me, is a mental prison that
Mm.
limits our imagination. And also, because you're trapped on this ball, like you're told, unless you're an astronaut, you're never going to get off of here.
Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
basically, that's the end of the line of thought. Well, we can never go off, so I don't need to think about anything beyond that.
Mm.
And so, they're telling us that extraterrestrials are light years away if they exist at all, whereas extra terra could, like additional Earth, essentially, could be just over the edge of Antarctica.
The pond. Yeah.
Yeah, it could
Yeah.
be the next hole in the ice, or this what I touched on last time about the crater Earth theory, and that guy who did a whole series of
Oh yeah.
really brilliant um, videos. So the first thing what he did was got um, he identified which crater on the moon is the Earth,
He thought. Right. Okay.
and he did a 3D model based on that image that was given, and then filled it with virtual water, and the
Yeah.
continents appeared.
Okay.
And you could see where, like, it was all very sort of abstract in a way, but you could say, well, this is Australia, that's this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And then there was a problem that America was the wrong way around. And then he's got this theory that
Okay.
there could be two suns, and that New
Mm.
York, like, so the west coast and the east coast of America is actually flipped. And
That would make sense.
yeah, it's all really strange. And he also went that the entrance to, like, because that particular crater has this kind of sort of like a horseshoe shape, and there's a way out, and that's Antarctica.
Yeah.
There's a way out of the crater. And then another
So
thing he did was he looked at the moon map and identified all the other planets and constellations that we see in the sky. So,
mm.
like the Pleiades and other star systems. And like his theory is that Atlantis is in the crater that we know as Saturn, which actually plays into the whole satanic narrative as well. Okay. So at some point, that crater got flooded and the Atlanteans escaped and well, they basically came and hijacked the Planet of the Apes. And another video he did was about the so going into the Planet of the Apes and the monolith, how that is kind of injecting a program and a radiation that is changing the apes into useful apes that they can use to do things for them. And funny enough, a year ago, all these monoliths popped up all over the place. Do you remember that?
Yeah, the silver ones, yeah.
And yeah, that was weird. And
what was the deal with that?
Nobody really knows. Like, nobody knows anybody who's physically seen those monoliths. So for all we know, they could just be, CGI'd and put into the news cycle.
Right. Yeah, because they did hit the mainstream as well. So
yeah, but like, how do we know that they were actual real monoliths?
Don't know.
Like, it could be that somebody just did a Photoshop image and it got put into the news and sold to us as a real thing.
Yeah, Janine looked into
and like
it.
I said in another interview that I think that a lot of this stuff that is coming out is actually artificial intelligence that is giving us information. Just based on some of the articles that you read, and how it's basically one sentence, a whole article, the same sentence, just recut and repasted together. And you read the whole article and it's the same thing over and over and over again, just rearranged. And at the end of it, you still don't know anything. And the grammar and the spelling is really terrible a lot of the time. And you kind of go, like, if you're a journalist, you would never, ever, if you had any kind of pride in your work, you would never go and send that to the publisher. Or, an editor should pick that up. And so, but the thing is also, like, you've seen those compilations of, they start off with one newsroom and they give you the spiel, and then the second newsroom on a different channel, exactly the same sentence, and then it's just a whole wall of newsrooms with the same sentence, just they change the location. So they're all working off of a script, and with the media being owned by just a handful of corporations, and that they basically get their news from Reuters or Associated Press. Nobody goes back to a source to verify anything. It's just like it comes out on their inbox and say, oh, this is the news, this has just happened. Nobody goes to verify it, they just print it.
Yeah.
And they're under so much pressure to get the news out before the next, get the scoop on something, that that they could inject any kind of information and it would just run. And because the next news thing is right behind it, then that becomes old news and you talk about the next thing. And so it's just at such an incredible pace that it's, I don't know. I don't know that any of it is real anymore. What is real?
Yeah.
But so fascinating stuff. I am leaning towards the idea that of the bigger Earth, and that the moon is an image of the bigger Earth, and that these planets and stuff are actually different craters on the Earth.
Okay.
And also ties into the ancient monuments. I mean, we know that the pyramids are in the shape of the Orion's belt, the constellation. And also, so he found that Stonehenge is a model of the Earth.
Okay.
Like that crater, and where there's a road that's been built which goes across that exit in Antarctica on the Stonehenge model.
Yeah.
And there's a mound monument that's basically just a hill nearby there that's also got a road cutting it off. And like you'd have to go and actually, I'm just kind of paraphrasing what I remember from it, but and then there are these ancient monuments in England nearby there that just line up exactly with certain star systems and stuff. So basically what the ancients have done is they've made miniature maps with all their monuments of the bigger Earth, basically, or miniature models. Yeah. Who knows what for or how? Like even, Stonehenge is another thing. Like, how did they transport those stones? How did they quarry those stones? And how did they move them however many 100 kilometers from the quarry to where they put them? And what for? It's all these unanswered questions that when you actually look at the official narrative, it's so full of holes. It makes no sense at all.
All the official narratives of anything that's ever happened is always full of holes.
Yeah, and do you know Campbell from Autodidactic? He's got a YouTube channel. He's from Perth as well, and he has looked at the Tartario mud flood and how we've got this identical architecture all over the world. Mud flooded buildings, the world exhibitions, that all these glorious architecture that supposedly was only temporary, cardboard and plaster sort of thing for 6 months, and then it would get torn down.
Yeah.
Like we've had those sort of exhibitions in Tasmania even. Like in Hobart, there was this huge building that, half a forest went into building it, and then they just, I don't know, they all seemed to burn down at the end somehow. Right. And we've actually still got the Albert Hall here in Launceston that the narrative tells us was built for an exhibition in 1891 or something. It was built for, and it's still standing today. Yeah. But I have looked and asked and have not found a single photograph of that building under construction. This is 1891. That's
not that
at
long
least
ago.
Years after the invention of photography. So 1891, photography was well and truly established. And you'd think that the biggest public building in the Southern Hemisphere at the time would be recorded somehow.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist. There's one panorama that was shot from the hill over there, and on that place there's a building that looks like it's being built, but the building is a completely different shape, and none of the windows in that photograph line up with what's there now. So I'm going, like, how is that building under construction when it's completely different shape? Makes no sense. And I've asked the library and I've asked his history groups. No one has come up with anything. No answers. So I'm guessing that it was already there and it's a fake narrative.
Yeah.
Same as we have a lot of old buildings here, like an example just next door to me. The whole facade is stonework, and it has holes about that deep, about yay big. And it's this net pattern. So it's just these holes, and each stone is decorated with that pattern. So like to chisel that out of a rock would just take forever. And so you think, oh, maybe it was a mold and they were cast in concrete. But when you look in detail, each single stone has a different pattern on it.
Mm.
So that they're not cast, they're individually made with that pattern. And you think the whole facade is covered in that. And it's just crazy. And then further down the road, you've got a building that has foundation stones that would be about 1 meter along the street, 40 centimeters or half a meter high, with that same pattern on it. And the walls of that building are at least 1 meter deep. So I have no idea how big those rocks are. Come here. Oh. Still want to be on the lap or on the floor. And it has the same pattern, and where there's a join, the pattern matches across the joint.
Yeah.
It's not just that they made one rock and then another one and then it doesn't match up where they join. It's perfect match. We have buildings with windows that are buried in the ground. We go, why would you put a window that close to the ground? It makes no sense.
Mm.
There's a building here that still has the old ironwork up on the roof that researchers have identified as being Antiquitech or old energy harvesting technology. So my theory, and I've said this in another interview before, is that the whole convict settlement narrative we're given is complete horseshit. It's not true.
Yeah, I wonder about that now. I don't know. Yeah. You got to question everything.
Because the down the road here at the Parliament building, there's a plaque that commemorates the arrival of Van Diemen, the Dutch explorer, in 1642.
Right.
That's 160 years before the British came and settled here.
Mm.
What was here? Why was no one interested in this place for 160 years? If they knew about it, and then Cook comes along and supposedly discovers it in 1770 something.
Yeah, 1770.
Something like that. But even that's 130 years after Van Diemen. And Tasmania was originally called Van Diemen's Land.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and it's not that long ago that it was named Tasmania, actually. So, questions upon questions, and what's real and what's not.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and we can chat more about that later. But we're coming up to the hour now, and I've got a few things I got to do. But yeah, we can talk about Tartaria, I think, next time, and we can go into what exactly that is and when that period of time was, why it came to an end, perhaps, and a few other things.
Well, it appears that our timeline of history started in about 1850, which would tie in with the Australian kind of narrative as well. And I reckon that, like us, Freemasons are called Freemasons because they rock up to a flooded city and find Freemasonry. They dig it out of the mud and tart it up, and then introduce a new population and give them a new narrative.
Yeah.
And then, fake evidence, fake newspaper articles, fake everything. And it runs from there, but it's all controlled, like the country. Is your cat purring? Have you got a cat?
Yeah, I do have a cat, yeah.
It sounds like she's purring.
She probably is. Yeah, she purrs pretty loud.
Yeah, it's like I'm from Switzerland, and I remember at school we had to learn by heart all these battles and what year they were and bloody bloody blah, all this historical stuff. And you become an adult and you haven't. And Switzerland is really, it's the spider in the middle of the web in this whole system that we got. Like, yeah, that maybe we could talk about Switzerland for a bit.
Yeah, that'd be great actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, all right. So
yeah, we'll definitely be talking about that. Sure.
Day, hey?
Yeah, sounds good, man. Well,
All right.
thanks for coming on, and I'll let you know when this video goes up, and we'll see you have another one.